everybody. Welcome to the Family Pictures podcast.
Jesus, Jim.
Welcome to the
appropriate
Family
for the
Picture
trash
podcast.
we're about to be talking about here.
This is number 16, and I still don't have it right. I'm here with my co-host,
Michael Branson Smith.
and I'll say my name again because I didn't know. Say my name. I'm Jim Groom. And we're here to talk today about none other than John Waters' 1974 Female Trouble.
Oh,
now,
boy. Trouble is right.
Now, okay. Obviously, there may be differing opinions on this film from a wide variety of people, and that's good. That's what makes up the world we live in. But I have to say, the opening song and the credits to this film maybe the most polished piece of the whole thing. I got lots of problems, which I think should be I got lots of trouble, but they say I got lots of problems. Female trouble.
I love this. It's spare me your morals. I've got lots of problems. Female trouble. I also wrote these down because I actually like the song too. I'm berserk. I like it fine as long as I'm grabbing a headline. John Waters wrote the lyrics to the song, and it's sang by Divine, so it all goes super well. And that, and wanting cha-cha heels for Christmas is how we start a movie.
Okay, little background on this movie.
Little is necessary.
It's John Waters' third or fourth film.
More like fourth or fifth, potentially, I think.
Maybe, and I am blurry here, so I'm having camera problems. But it was made for twice as much as his previous film, Pink Flamingos, which basically kind of made him a cult hero. It became a midnight movie alongside stuff like Rocky Horror Picture Show. I mean, it was a huge success. And that was made for $12,000. This one, I guess he upped his budget, was made for a whopping $25,000. Now, I don't know what that is in 70s money, but it's not a ton of money by film standards.
So $25,000, right, at that time, literally probably half of it was for the actual film and the processing of the film, I would bet. That would be my guess. And then the cost of whatever media you're recording sound on. Everything else is pretty much a bootstrapped donation of a sort, including all the locations, for people that are fans. And I ultimately super appreciate this kind of old school. This is, underground filmmaking. This is what we call guerrilla filmmaking. Get access, get permission later, or seek forgiveness for later, right? So. And I did learn too.
Forgiveness for your permission that you never got.
Right, exactly. And the other thing I learned is, and this makes sense too, is I remember, I oddly went to Catholic college, not a Catholic. It was Holy Cross in the early 90s, late 80s. And I remember the films they would show. I was like, I don't know any of these films. Like, what is going on here? And I would see what was on in the theater at the school, and I'd be like, who's picking these films? And the same thing with the radio station, which I actually had a Sunday morning radio station, and there was this very strict rule about you must play music from this catalog they had. And I would look through, and I was like, I don't know any of these records, because I was a normie in a lot of ways. Like, I was not a punk like Jim Groom for life. And so I would bet, so this is what I learned, is like this film, the way it was initially released was on the college circuit. They would play it for one night, and John Waters talked about how he would get paid for movies by the minute, right? And so he'd get like $90. And this is not necessarily at the college circuit, but he would get, it was some other film forum type place, and he'd get $90, right? And it was, then they go back to playing porn. Wait, I don't hear your sound, Jim.
No, that's funny. I had to because my bell was ringing.
Okay.
But it's interesting because I think it did become a bit of a thing in a theater in New York, at least Pink Flamingos, is where that blew up. And, the gay downtown scene was really into it. But then kind of the kids from the suburbs who wanted this kind of like, crash culture, and they loved the rowdiness of the film and how insane, Divine was. But that's actually kind of a good segue. One of the things I love, you've already talked about, and I think it's great, is just how DIY this thing is. Like, this is DIY filmmaking, and it's very much harkens back to the 80s or 60s art filmmakers, like the great Warhol or Kenneth Anger or some of those who kind of did this stuff on the fly, didn't give a shit about production, but just wanted to make a movie with an idea, right? Like, just boom. And Waters is definitely in that tradition. Very cool. But I also love, kind of like Warhol, he had his own little, like, low-rent factory in Baltimore called the Dreamlanders.
The Dreamliners.
Yeah. The Dreamliners and Landers.
Oh, shoot. You're right. Which is it?
It's the Mainliners, but that's a different group. We'll get to them later.
The Dreamlanders.
The Dreamlanders.
Okay, yeah.
Did you correct me and then you're wrong?
It's quite possible.
Damn it. So anyway, before I was rudely interrupted by my wrong colleague over here, I actually love the idea of this having like this group of folks from Baltimore who are just insane, literally, and like will do anything with Waters. Like, you name it, I'll do it on film. I don't give a shit. And like, this is the context of like his kind of art for the late 60s and early 70s. And there is kind of two facets, I think, of John Waters' like artistic career. There's this moment, which I think still stands out. And then there's the kind of 80s and 90s films, which are good, but I don't think in some real ways they hold a candle to the early Waters. And my argument there, and many people make it better, so it's nothing too special, is a Waters film, as I watched it for the first time in like 93, and then I watched it 30 years later in like 2025, like, it's still the most insane thing you're gonna watch. It hits all the buttons. It's completely irreverent, but it's also really dirty, and it makes you want to take a shower, and then watching it becomes painful, and then you have to see all of these grimy elements that you never wanted to see. And I think very few films that I can think of are as like raw and as kind of like punch you in the face in the way that these early Waters films still do, right? Like, it's almost like Waters created a template, early Waters created a template that even late Waters couldn't keep up with. Because what he had done in the early 70s, late 60s had been kind of now, there's the standard. And either you're insane enough to try and go past it, or you're just like, no, that's kind of Waters stuff, right? Like, it doesn't really have a genre of its own, right? Like, it's not really something like you can reproduce in a way and fully kind of, I don't know, address the fact that, like, this is not, you know who said it best? I think Siskel said it best, or no, the other one.
Rex Reed, the one who trashed.
Ebert said it best when he said, this isn't really like a star-worthy film because it doesn't really work on the system of stars that are used for films. It's something else altogether.
Well, that something else, I think, is the thing that ultimately, I think, makes the most sense to me about it is, number one, this is like many things in the 70s, I imagine, that we've seen in film, and we talked about Tatum O'Neal getting almost tossed off 13 feet of boxes on a car, or smoking cigarettes at age 9. And so there's that aspect of, you literally can't get away with doing that in film anymore. There's uses of language that would never fly anymore, like the R word, and how he describes Divine. Dawn Davenport just berates her daughter, right? Is an example. But it's because it's not made for film anymore. Where is it now? Well, where did it first come? There's like a nice linear line where it went through. It's the Jerry Springer Show, right?
Yeah.
And we look at the Jerry Springer Show. What's the Jerry Springer Show typical plot? a woman is on set talking about how she's cheated on her husband, and then they bring out her husband and announce it to him in front of her. He flips out, or she flips out. They both flip out. There's physical fights, which are similar to what we see. There's a lot of physicality. And what's going on the entire time? The audience is cheering along, right? Yeah. And that's what happens at the final moment of this film. And her show is, she's doing all these bombastic things, and threatening the audience itself, and they're all just cheering along. And then, next is TMZ. So we stop. For a hot minute, we get away from let's have average people perform out these acts, and let's talk about famous people performing these acts, but we can't get them on stage in front of us. So TMZ, let's just go in the newsroom and talk about this gross stuff as we would by a water cooler, and make that a TV show.
Yeah.
And then finally, where we are now, which is reality television. And reality television is just like, nope, let's go back to the real thing, but let's hyper produce it. You know, and let's put a real veneer of officialdom to these trashy people and their behavior, and kind of sanctify it with production value. Whereas John Waters had no production value. He couldn't sanctify it in the same way.
And I think in my mind, and I like where you're going with that to Jerry Springer, and then, Ricky Lake, who's a John Waters product. And then you go on from there. But the thing for me that's separating, and I kind of agree with you on the last point, is the production value of these films. And I think it's the difference between his 60s and 70s films and his later 80s and 90s and even aughts films is like the production value and the art direction and the lack thereof in some ways, although they were very cleanly directed in that regard, means everything. I think that kind of grime and sleaze, in this sense that you as an audience are slumming in these people's lives, and that actually is materially visible on the film by the way in which the film looks, is really, for me, one of the things I can't get over when I watch Waters films is that idea, or Waters film, is that idea of how disgusting everything looks. Of how slovenly Divine is. It's and so bad. The eating of a meatball sandwich in class. There's something about when Divine eats or even talks about food.
But you're talking about the situations, and we could also just talk about the filmmaking. And I will say this is in part to the lack of budget, but there is not really any filmmaking going on here. It's a TikTok video where someone pushed record and did stuff in front of it. That's what TikTok is now. And what makes good TikToks are people being really, really clever, like John Waters, and creating these situations. But the production value is non-existent. The sound is, there's a microphone that's way the fuck over here. And so it's like early, like walking, you have to walk near the microphone so you can actually hear the actors. But it's all very big room tone but whatever. I mean,
but there is some, I like this, but there is some, let's kind of start.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, by the way, can you back up for a second and please explain to me, why is this a family picture, Jim?
Yes, let's go there now. So, I actually thought of this as a family picture. I met with a friend who had just discovered John Waters, and he's got to be in his 40s. And he's like, I don't think I've seen anything like it. And I was telling him about our podcast. And he's like, you should do Female Trouble as a
Screw
family
this guy.
film. Yeah, and I do
hit him for me, just like Divine hit his daughter. Like, just go up and hit him for me, okay?
Zach, I agree with you. Like, I think there are very few filmmakers who I think, and I said this already, and I'll repeat it, like who's kind of like punch in the face from the actual experience of watching their film remains as long as Waters. It was still as fresh as like I said when I watched it 30 years ago. So anyway, that's why we watched this as a family film.
Because your friend said so?
What's that?
Because your friend said so?
No, listen to me. I'm getting into the meat here. I know you're mad, but you don't have to take it out on me. So we'll go and we start with our protagonist, Divine, who is
Dawn
Dawn Davenport in this movie. And it starts with us seeing Dawn go to her locker.
But we get a title card. Davenport Youth, 1960.
1960, yeah. So we get a time and place. She puts her books in the locker, in an old metal locker, which I'm familiar with from my childhood or from my going to school. But this is filmed in an abandoned school. You know, this school was abandoned, so they went in, and again, like the guerrilla filmmaking, made their shots in here. But the first thing is, you know, they're talking, and she's in school, and she's talking with her friend Concetta, as they say. And Concetta's like, "Did you study for the test? Did you do this?" And the first thing, you know, Dawn says is, "I hope I fail." And that just sets the tone of the whole movie. Later on, and we could talk about the classroom scene because it's very similar to the classroom scene from the 400 Blows in some ways. And then also my favorite film, Firstborn, that we've watched so far.
Right.
Like, they start with this authoritarian teacher who makes fun of the kids. You know, this teacher calls Dawn Davenport fat, which leads "Don't eat a meatball hero" in class, which is another great scene. But so we have that. And we have this kind of juvenile delinquent film, which would be a kind of drive-in movie, 50s film that Waters will have seen. So he kind of like takes these little pastiches. This is our first one. And there is a great shot when you have Concetta, Chiclet, and Dawn, which are
in the bathroom.
in the bathroom smoking cigarettes.
That was probably one of the scenes I actually really liked.
Yeah, and it was a great scene.
Even visually, like their hair and their costumes, and you know, their hair is just
60s.
like hilariously large. Like they couldn't. It's that playing with the 50s bouffant, right, and turning it into this, you know, Frankenstein of a hairdo that's 3 times the size of what it's supposed to be. And that's very punk ultimately too, and I get that, and I love it.
And they say, I mean, a lot of people talk about Waters as proto-punk, or even like the New York Dolls are around now. So there's that moment of kind of, you know, this is in the punk milieu, if you will. But anyway, so they're sitting there in the bathroom after the whole, you know, initial scene where the authoritarian teacher's a complete jackass to everybody, and Chiclet says, "I hope I get expelled," right? And then to one up Chiclet, Dawn says, "I hope I get arrested."
I hate school. I hate my parents.
And if my parents don't get me those cha-cha heels, I don't know what I'll do.
No, I'm running away. She says it. She's like, "I'm done with them."
How can you not love that? Like, how can you not
Here's the thing. It's because the filmmaking is so bad overall. This is the thing. It's like, I wish, in a weird way, if this had showed up in my lap as a graphic novel, I would have loved it, you know, because it's just so, the transgressiveness is very appealing in a lot of ways, and the you know, in the murdering and the fighting and all this kind of stuff. And to me, if it was a comic, which gives you even more ability to be, you know, extreme in the visualizations, right? Because they're constrained by their budget and whatnot, and it's like, oh man, I wish Robert Crumb had written this and drawn it. That's how I would love to. That would be one way I would love to read this. I wish that, if I'm imagining it probably exists. Like, has someone done the graphic novel version of Female Trouble? It probably has been done. I should look. But that's how I would, in some sort of pseudo Robert Crumb style, I would love to read this.
Yeah, and that's actually, I like that. And oddly, unlike you, I didn't have as much problems with the visual and the bad filmmaking, because I think in many ways that's the kind of medium in which he's dealing with, right? This complete sense of trash, right? He's not making any excuses for it. And so we go to the next scene. So after we've done with the school scene, we go to the scene where it's Christmas morning. Dawn Davenport wakes up and kind of begrudgingly goes down with her presents for her parents. The parents make her sing a song before they open up presents. I think it's like Silent Night or something.
And she actually sings. I'm actually impressed that she sings along for a hot minute, which is funny. and one other thing can I mention is the Christmas tree is so large, it makes the mom and dad look like hobbits. They're
It's gigantic, and the house is kind of like a garish '70s house, as you might, with the carpet.
Yeah, it's a single story ranch with a mixture of brick and siding, and the interior is the garish wallpaper that was the something that must have been the hot thing at Sears like a decade ago, but it's so out of place because it's been decontextualized from the modern furniture it was designed to go with these big sloppy brown canvasy styled plaid couches.
Love it.
Among many other things that we grew up with in terms of mixed home styles.
Yeah, and so for me, I always love that art design, and
Yeah.
the person Vincent Peranio, my Italian screws me up now. Peranio. He's the art director for this film, and also the director for many of John Waters' films. And so he's behind a lot of the quote unquote settings. I don't know what that means in this film, but so Divine or Dawn basically doesn't get the cha-cha slippers. And this was one of the scenes where seeing it for the first time, I was just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
He essentially attacks the mom, smashes all the presents, steals the ones, or takes the ones back he gave to his parents, smashes them all, and then attacks the parents. Fuck you, fuck this, fuck that. And then takes the tree and rips it down, and the mother's stuck underneath the tree, circling the tree. And then obviously after that, in this kind of strange ass, because the wardrobe is a whole nother thing, in this great nightgown that, Divine or Dawn Davenport, who was like a 280-pound, 6-foot man, like, transing, and as a kind of, character, is absolutely insane. Running down the street. I mean,
and a black leather jacket too.
I just think like when I saw that then and when I still see it now, I'm just like, what is this? Like the insanity and the fact that they could do as much as they have and made such a big impact for next to nothing with this, it's a lot of shock, right? It's a lot of shock value. I mean, even to the point where the movie's dedicated to Tex Watson, who was part of the Manson family, and there was a little helicopter that he had created that John Waters had kept in it. I think Waters had regretted almost so blithely dealing with these kind of mass cult family. That
I mean it is a slight it's good to think about contextually at the time of the making of this movie. Charlie Manson hadn't been caught yet, so it's literally part of the news of the moment. In a funny thing, or maybe that was Pink Flamingo. He hadn't been caught yet, but yeah, his obsession with Manson. He kind of regrets the glibness with which he associated the film with that.
But my argument here, so we'll go on when he goes. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Well, and this is the thing. Well, I mean, for $25,000, the thing that ultimately, even though I'm trashing the filmmaking here, what I will never trash is the intensity of the scene crafting here. There's probably, I don't know, 50 locations in this film. And that means there's hundreds and hundreds of setups across all these spaces and trying to pull off his vision of this story with the limited resources he has. And so, I mean, I definitely respect that. And though we're forced to endure so much grossness by the side of the road in a hot minute here.
Yes, yeah, we'll get to that. But okay, the piece about that, and we don't have to go into too much detail, but the interesting piece about that is there's Divine playing Dawn Davenport, and then there's that same character playing the man who's essentially raping, or not actually. They seem to be in consensual sex.
Well, yeah, but Earl Peterson is, she's 14 in the scene.
I didn't do that math there.
Yeah, so technically, he's raping her regardless. But he is, they keep saying like, there's famous quotes about people telling Divine, like when she's in public events, like there's hecklers, and a heckler would say, "Go fuck yourself" to Divine, and she's like, "I already did that," right? Because in this scene that comes, basically, Divine plays her rapist as well as a man. So Divine is playing Dawn Davenport as as a drag queen styled woman, and then Earl Peterson is a man, just a slovenly, gross with his what do they call it?
Skid marks?
Skid mark, thank you, in his underwear. Oh my
Oh
god!
my God, to that detail, like you really feel like John Waters when he makes this film hates you, because he's like,
Yep.
I'm gonna make you look at this. I'm gonna make you see this.
Yeah.
But I think also the thing about Divine as an actor that I didn't really pick up on the first time around is the insanity and intensity with which they do everything in this film, right? Like, and it goes on later with the dancing and all that, but like there is an intensity and a kind of like personality of Divine that at first when I saw this as a 20-something, I was just like, who is this nutball? But now Divine, being this established figure, and was even dead the first time I saw it, had died by then. Like,
yeah, she died of a heart attack in like 1988.
Yeah, but at this point, like when watching it in retrospect, like I'm pretty impressed with just what they had accomplished in this. Because you talk about like all the different scenes and all everything, but then you have to talk about the players and how much they are absolutely all in. And I think they're what sell John Waters' vision. Like, I think Divine, and this is a film centered around every element of Divine, how much they put into this and how insane they are willing to be and go is what makes this film probably the classic, and however you want to understand that it is. I mean, Divine's just, I think, amazing in this. I do.
It's just so over the top. I mean, this is, again, my normie side coming. It's just endlessly over the top. It's endlessly yelling, and we're not even getting to it's yelling at her parents, then yelling at her daughter, then yelling at any person that's committing any form of transgression. And these are monologues that'll be like 3 pages long, and they're in a single take. So I'm just more feeling the relentlessness of it, I guess, and getting through that, while at the same time, I'm doing my best to appreciate the effort of this madcap community of art makers here.
Yeah, not artists, art makers. Now let me say this. Let me. I want to go, and we're going to kind of pull it back a notch, and we're going to go to a scene that's a little bit. I mean, it gets to the family pictures part of our podcast.
Oh yeah.
Is when Divine, as a result of that, roadside encounter, is pregnant, and Divine actually.
Jump.
What's that?
9-month jump.
9-month jump to them being pregnant, calling Earl and saying, "Earl, I want money," and Earl, replying with what you might expect from Earl. And then
yourself.
We have this really great moment on the couch when Taffy comes to be. And how do you think...
Wait, what? Taffy comes to be? It was like, did the stork show up, Jim? What are you talking about?
No. This is when... I think this is how Taffy got his name. Or her name.
Her name.
Yeah, that's right. Is Taffy as being born, right? You see it. You cut to
on
it. On a couch.
By herself.
Bursts Taffy.
Yep.
Then you see the baby, bloody, and you got to by yourself. You're holding the baby. You got to do something with the umbilical cord. So what does Divine do? What does Dawn do?
Bites it off,
and that's why I think that.
And it was a condom filled
Taffy.
with liver.
And the baby, which is a
bloody.
Newborn baby, I guess was just born by one of the troop of.
Yep.
And
one of the Dreamlanders, yeah, they filmed this last because one of the Dreamlanders was pregnant throughout the filming, and they're like, once you have your baby, can we use your baby to make this scene? And apparently the actress's mother had come from Europe to watch this, and she's like, what the motherfucking fuck?
So like another just completely insane scene. I mean, and this is where we get to a family picture. Now, this is a family picture, Michael.
I agree.
It may be an anti-family picture.
It absolutely is an anti-normie family picture, right?
Yeah.
And it's an indictment of, this. I was listening to this podcast to try to make sense of this, and there's this. It's pretty cool. It's called Horror Queers.
Yeah.
With Joe Lipset and Trace Thurman, and one of the things they were talking about the Christmas scene actually is how in queer culture Christmas is this hated moment in various queer communities because it is the culmination of norminess coming together. It's like everybody agrees Christmas is good, right?
Yeah.
You have corporate culture, family culture, school culture all coming together. It's like, yes, Christmas is good. And as a queer person where you've often are trying to have escaped that environment where you weren't accepted and left, you're forced to go back home to it.
Yeah.
And so where the anti-family tendencies come from is, I guess, understandable, of course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the spokeswoman for that more than anyone is Aunt Ida. Right, so we get like a full philosophy in this film about that, about like the dangers of the heterosexual world and why can't you just be queer and smart versus straight and dumb. And there's so many goodnesses of Aunt Ida, but we would be jumping ahead a little bit if we went right to Aunt Ida. But
because we're skipping past Dawn Davenport, Career Girl, 1961 to 1967, which basically is about 7 shots, and then it goes right on to Dawn Davenport, Early Criminal.
Do you like the way? Because I like the way it's like, Dawn Davenport at, a waitress. Dawn Davenport sitting on the corner waiting to get into a car, and then
she's hooking the streets of Baltimore with Chiclet and Conchetta,
and then
then they're doing a scene from Clockwork Orange where they're wearing. Well, they're not really wearing ski masks because they don't want to fuck up their hair. They're wearing like veils, and they go rob a drunk man,
which is the best. It's right out of Clockwork, and I think that. But I also. I enjoyed those snippet and those quick takes about, here's X amount of time in this film, right? That shows you passage time from 61 to 64, whenever it is, of her as Career Girl. And I dig that. Like, I mean, sure, it's ugly, it's messy, but he is showing an understanding of the craft and also giving a big FU to it at the same time. Like, he doesn't really care. So, dig that. But let's go to 68, early.
Right, because this is where family comes back in the picture.
Yeah, family plays a big part in at least another third of the picture until we get to, half.
I mean, Taffy's there at the very end.
Yeah, true. So let's say, why, if you were a parent in 1968, would you not want to send your kid to school? Because Taffy at this point is how old? 7, 8 years old? 6 years old. Basically, roping around the house, annoying Dawn to no end with her stupid rhymes, as she says. And then, but we also learn that she's not sending her to school.
No, and she has no friends.
She has no friends.
And she's beating her with a car aerial whenever she's bad.
And she said,
and she's telling her, like, the rule is you have to go jump rope in the bathroom. And she's like, but it doesn't work in there.
Yeah, not enough room. And there's a couple of reasons that I thought were great why she can't go to school. A, I'm not giving you lunch money. B,
she's not giving her food either.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you help with your homework because that's annoying. It's just so great. And then C is, I don't want all your annoying friends coming here after asking their insipid questions. How can you not love that, Michael? In terms of, we're doing a family pictures podcast, and this is the model of mother we have in Dawn Davenport.
I mean, the funny thing is, it reminds me in a weird way of Mad Men, where Betty is hosting like friends for a party because the friends come over, Chiclet and Conchetta come over in a hot minute.
That's right.
And the Draper's daughter, I'm forgetting the character's name, is serving drinks, right? And they're told to be quiet. Like there is this like, kids, get the fuck out of the room because you're not supposed to be part of this. Like adults need to be adulting and kids are not allowed to be in here. And that is, in the setting of that is literally like 1967, 68. And so it is that description of what family life was supposed to be. You know, kids are meant to be silent, not heard. Parents don't interact with their kids in a way that, you know, you're trying to befriend them and share their interests like, you know, good parents like I do. Not Jim Groom, who just has these hobbies that his kids aren't interested in.
I don't know. I don't have that pleasure, if you will.
So,
in fact, like Taffy, I chained my kids to the bed.
Yeah. You mean like Dawn? I chained
like
Dawn.
Yeah.
So. And so Chiclet and Conchetta come over having just stolen a television, and they talk about how they can probably get $10 a piece for it. And Taffy is getting in the way, and they're literally telling her to shut up. And Dawn goes on to saying, "Oh my God, she's such a monster. How could have this happened?" And Taffy starts screaming. So what do?
Yeah. They bring her up with the aerial. Like there's always the threat.
They drag her. They like, it's like this is a hostage taking scene, literally, where they drag her up the stairwell to what appears to be the attic, and they chain her to the bed.
Yeah, there's like chains hanging down above the bed.
Yeah,
and then they go back down to Dawn's room. It seems it's crazy set blue bed, where they're sitting on the bed, and this guy who writes for the Criterion, or amongst other things, he wrote a bit about this. It's called Female Trouble, Spare Me Your Morals by Ed Halter. And one of the things he wrote is, the scene is like right out of a melodrama, like Mildred Pierce or, you know, Imitation of Life, where they're sitting on the bed, and she's like, nothing I can do. You know, I can beat her with an aerial. I can do this, but nothing changes her. And that's where I think also another moment where I think, what is this kind of fun? He's having the JD, right? The juvenile delinquent film in the beginning. Here you get this kind of play on this melodrama of the family life and of actually trying to be a good parent but losing control of your kid, where it's completely inverted in this situation, right? Like Divine is the worst possible parent you can imagine. And there's a play on that. Like he's doing that very willfully. He's writing it really funnily. And
yeah,
sure, the you're gonna get what you get with the camera work for $12,000 to $25,000. You're right.
That's what I mean. Ultimately, that's what I'm saying. It's all. It's. I come back to like I want to read this script rather than watch it. To be honest, you know, and why I almost would rather it be a graphic novel, because the writing is so good. The writing is incredible. I couldn't keep up with all the one-liners that would be fun to talk out. You know, and I think if this film, the way that, you know, in our youth, there's certain films, the dialogue becomes part of the meme culture of our existence and you know, with our friends. This film absolutely would have become that if you could have accessed it in a way that was in normal, you know, filmmaking culture, but then it wouldn't have worked. I understand that ultimately.
But they say that this was like that, like the big hardcore, you know, when they would play at midnight movies, cult classics, like people had memorized the film.
Yeah.
There were scenes where they would kind of chant or holler or know the film. Like, for example, Conchetta and Chiclet talk about this, you know, hairdresser, Gator. And that's in this scene.
Right.
And that's when we first get introduced to Aunt Ida. And Aunt Ida is something to behold. And again, something with the outfits here. Like this leather, like basically, I don't know what you would call it. This leather S&M suit that's far too small for Aunt Ida that she somehow gets into.
And she talked about the actor, who's the actress? Edith Massey talked about absolutely hating the outfit, hating. It was so uncomfortable, which is not surprising. We have to do these. We have to get uncomfortable for beauty, Jim Groom. Absolutely.
Exactly. So this is when we first get introduced to Edith Massey or to Aunt Ida. And she says to her nephew, I think it is, Gator, basically like, why aren't you gay? And
Right.
she's like, I'll tell you, Aunt Heidi, I tell you again, I'm straight. She's like, how can you not be straight? And she basically says the line that people say May is one of the hallmark line of this film is, the world of heterosexual is sick and boring life.
Yeah,
and
I wrote that one down too.
And that would be like when the crowd would go crazy because like that was in some ways part of the philosophy of, Waters having fun, but then goes on and talks about, I don't want you to work, to have a family, to come home to kids, all this thing which we have kind of understood in the Family Pictures podcast as the norm or outside the norm. But this film doesn't even kind of play within that universe, right? It completely sits outside of it and throws rocks at it. Just completely attacks it. And I think in that way, it's a unique film, even if it is painful to watch, and it is at times, no question. Another scene coming up pretty quick will remind us
Jim,
of that.
I don't know. I mean, Dawn meets Gator, and they fall in love, and they get married in a church. That's really familial, right?
That is familiar, but the dress is something else. I don't know if you remember Dawn's dress.
Of course I do. It's translucent.
It's translucent in all the worst possible ways.
And it's in a real church too, which is kind of wild that they were able to film this drag queen in a translucent dress in an actual church.
An actual church. Well, he did another famous scene for his previous film where they had sex in a church. And he got that on camera. So, this is tame compared to previous shots he's done.
But I am jumping ahead because we meet another family, if you will, at the what's the name of
What is the name of the salon?
The salon. We have to look that up.
Yeah, that's too bad I didn't.
I wrote it down too.
Let's see if I have it here. I do have notes. No lunch money or homework help.
It's the lipstick something.
There it is.
Lipstick.
The lipstick boutique? No.
No, the lipstick beauty salon. That's it. Something. It's super. It was too simple for our smooth-brained heads.
So who we meet there, and that's a great. So the idea here, and it's like the idea that's going to kind of dominate the rest of this film, right? Is Donald and Donna Dasher run
The owners.
Yeah. What's that?
The owners of the lipstick
owners.
beauties.
They run it, right? And the whole idea is they select who their clients are. And Conchetta and Chiclet were really like, you should go, Dawn. And so Dawn, being excited at the possibility of being selected, goes. And there's these 4 or 5 women sitting in the kind of what you imagine is the antechamber to get in. And they're being drilled, or they're being kind of interviewed by Donald and Donna Dasher. And how does that go?
Basically, one immediately gets when she's asked, "What's your job?" and she says, "Oh, I work at a telephone company." And she's like, "Get out of here! What a terrible plain job!"
Exactly. I love it. And they just haze everybody. And the best part of that line is, I think the Dawn says, they say, what do you do? How do you define yourself? And I think she says, I'm a thief and a shit kicker.
Yes.
Such a I want to use that.
Yep.
I'm a thief and a shit kicker.
Yeah, they're like ravishing beauties only.
And obviously that's the joke with Divine, because Divine is super heavy set, right? But also wild looking, and the hair, like you said, is as big as can be. But the way in which Divine holds herself, and the way in which Divine refuses any kind of iconic idea of beauty, which we're still haunted by today, right? With our idea of a thin body or all this. She's the anti of all that. And I think that's one of the reasons it's very hard for me to wrap my head around it early. But also one of the things I think he's pushing so hard against any norm we might hold on to in this space, and just having fun with it, because I guess Divine and him have a long history. They were making films. They grew up in the same neighborhood. They kind of created Dreamlanders on his front lawn. Like, they were tight. And they did this together, and they came up together. And I think he's, in many ways, John Waters, like, acting out, like, his sick ego, right? His sick alter ego, whatever.
Absolutely his muse, for
sure. Does
it
beautifully. Beautifully, right? I mean, really, I love it. So anyway, he gets, or she gets, Dawn gets selected. And that's where she meets her future husband, Gator.
Yeah, Gator. And, she meets her choice. She gets to choose from Dribbles, Wink, Gator, or Butterfly.
And Wink is actually the art director.
Okay, and those are the four hairdressers. And they go on a date.
Do you remember?
And they're looking at wedding dresses, and they get married.
Do you remember what she asks for? Which is kind of like what seals it for her.
No.
She says, "Can I get a double egg salad on white toast?" And he's like, "Sure." And then as soon as that happens, they're walking along the harbor in Baltimore, and they're just having that moment before they obviously get married.
Yeah, it's funny too, because there's Errol Morris documentary, Mr. Death, right? I used to use this scene. It was called Coffee and Cigarettes, and we're meeting Fred Lucher, who's the titular character of this film, who was a person who ends up falling into the electric chair industry, like making electric chairs, and which is really odd. But there's this beautifully shot scene of him in a diner where he's talking about his coffee and cigarette habit and how he drinks like literally 2 dozen coffees a day, 4 packs of cigarettes a day. And that's all you're focused on. But at the very end, we start to hear this woman's voice. She worked in the diner, and it's like, oh, and I met him, and we interacted with one another, and then we were married. And that's what this feels like. It's just an afterthought. Oh, and then we were married. Like, marriage is no big thing. It isn't this familial big leap. We're going to have a future. It's just this thing. The real things that matter are your habits and your weirdness, because that's how Fred Lucher is presented. It's like how you're this manically unhealthy human being that a doctor can't convince you to stop, because he talked about the doctor's like, You drink 20 cups of coffee, you smoke 4 packs of cigarettes, you should be dead by now. And that's one of the quotes that Fred Lucher is describing a conversation with his doctor. And yeah, that's what this feels like. It's the marriage part is something that happened, but it's like, who cares?
Yeah. It was just a spectacle to wear that dress almost, right? Like, and it really does feel that way. And then you get to the hard realities of, 7 years later, I think we go to 1974. So 6 years later, current day.
Well, first, for a year later, Gator's drunk and cheating on Dawn with another woman, and then yelling at she's yelling. She's got Aunt Ida in her life, and she utterly hates her. So there's a brief stopover of how the salad days are very brief.
Does she throw a fish at Aunt Ida in the street?
Yeah,
at that time.
Yeah. This is like good. I guess niece-in-law, right?
And then, I mean, this is one of those scenes that I don't know. This has got to be a.
And then we jump to 1974.
1974.
And 1974 is where we exist for the remainder of the film too.
Yeah.
That's it. We're finally caught up to the now.
And even those backstories are just odd, right? They're not consistent. Like, one of them, like you said, could be 7 shots. The next one could be much longer, right? Like the 68. And then maybe you have one for like a second or two. And then now we're at the current day. And at the current day starts with Taffy, who's now 14.
Yeah.
And who everybody comments looks like a very, very odd 14.
For 14, you look like you're 30, because she is 30.
Exactly. Played by Mink Stoll, who is, I think, my favorite part of this. I mean, besides Divine, Mink is just insane in this. I love her.
Oh yeah, with the basically, blush so red it's like she's smeared lipstick on her cheeks.
Oh, she
God,
comes
this
in
movie.
and she walks in on her parents having all sorts of weird sex.
Yeah,
And
with pliers.
with needle nose pliers. And then so that goes on, and Divine's yelling, or Dawn's yelling at her, "Why would you break in?" And then basically Gator's like, "Hey, do you want to suck my dick?" And so like it gets to that, and then Taffy, my favorite line in the movie, I think, is,
Yep, this is famous. Yeah.
"I wouldn't suck your dick if I was suffocating and there was oxygen in your balls." I mean, come on, like that's the status of this movie in some ways, and it's just it doesn't give a fuck, right? It's just bam, bam, bam. It keeps going.
It literally, because they go back to bam, 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 and Gator shoves a carrot in Dawn's mouth and then kicks Gator out. And before you know it, they're getting divorced as a result of that.
Another thing I love about Taffy is always so quick to call Gator a hippie pig. Are you writing a book, you hippie?
Yeah.
Go listen to folk music. Like,
It's his long
always
hair.
talking shit about Gator as a hippie. And I love that. I just, that's why maybe Taffy is my favorite character.
Yeah. So
Now, there's something else after that that's probably the sickest scene in the film. If
which
you can
one?
say that.
In the salon with they're trashing her hair, or
No,
what?
this is when
Which one? There's
Taffy-
so many.
This is when Taffy is playing car accident.
Oh, I actually like that scene. That scene's kind of funny.
The scene is insane. When basically has set up broken glass with her friend gone through the windshield because she was in the death chair or the death seat. And then she's putting ketchup all over her upper body and face. And her mom walks in and
it's
I said, I told
child's
you
play.
not to play
It's
car
like,
accident.
Kids enjoying a nice little game by themselves because they're not allowed to. You got to get creative, and this is what happens when you're forced to go to your own devices and create a world around your interests. And so, yeah, she somehow drags a broken car window, and she has some sort of dummy and a steering wheel, and she's playing car accident.
And using ketchup, for
Yes.
the, blood scenes and talking
And
to her mom.
Dawn's response is, "How many times have I told you to play car accident outside?" and Taffy's response is, "Call an ambulance," which is really appropriate.
I mean, it's just so twisted. So we go there, and then Gator, and the divorce is pretty much happening. And maybe I'm skipping scenes. You let me know.
Oh, please.
But
do.
Gator comes and basically lets Aunt Ida know that he's leaving because he's got to get out of Baltimore. And he's going to find happiness in the auto industry in Detroit.
Yeah, I wrote that line too. I love that too. That's one of my favorite lines. "I'm going to Detroit to find happiness in the auto industry," Aunt Ida. And Aunt Ida is still like she literally has a gay man on her couch hanging out named Ernie, and she's like, "Come on, Ernie, you can make him stay. Come on." And he has none of it, of course. No. And then he has one last trip to say goodbye to his wife, to say one last thing. But none other than Taffy opens the door and spits on him first, and then literally spits on him.
Here.
And so then, oh my God, this movie, and then right? Dawn comes to the door and she's like, "I have just one last thing to say to you." It's like, oh yeah, that's great. And then he wallops her in the face.
Nails her. Now, you said it, and we'll go through it. Maybe we'll go a little quicker because people probably got the idea of what they're in for with this film. But
oh my God, yeah, we're almost at an hour already.
Have you seen too many films like this? Other films like this?
No, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, the closest I've ever, this kind of storytelling is in comic book form, is really where it's existed. This kind of writing, and and it's not something I would ever pick. And in our email, it was like, "Hey, female trouble." And I'm like, "What's that?" "Oh no, it's John Waters." And I'm like, "Oh no, you're finally going to make me watch my first John Waters film." But it wasn't. I had watched Serial Mom, actually, which I think actually would be fun to do, because I mean, it's just as twisted, ultimately, but it's with Kathleen Turner and a real budget.
And it's so much
very
cleaner.
different.
And I think the dirt of his early films makes the difference in my mind. Like, I think the actual way it looks and the fact that there's no technique to the filmmaking is what is more convincing than in something like Serial Mom.
I'd have to compare it again.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much more that goes on, and that's what I ultimately appreciate. We're basically, the rest of the film is basically about Dawn's relationship with the Dashers and how they manipulate Dawn into becoming this murderess and committing crimes that they can photograph for their own like sadistic pleasure. You know,
crime is beauty, right?
Yeah, crime is beauty, and it's they're effectively creating snuff films and snuff artifacts for the Dashers, and you know, it involves these crazy scenes where they first come for dinner and Taffy's there and she throws the spaghetti at the wall, and so then Dawn not Ida, yes, and Ida comes in briefly, but it's not before Dawn knocks out Taffy, and then through this like violence, the Dashers are totally thrilled. This is the best dinner party ever, you know, and so
stop before you hit it with the chair. Let's take a shot.
Yeah, and so they're taking photos, and that's actually one of the first times that Divine puts her pose on for them, right, with her crazy makeup. That is the makeup that extends practically beyond her ear, from her like nose to her ears, with eyeliner effectively, and eye makeup, and that look is kind of incredible. I actually love that look, and it's what's epitomized in the it's posterized and put on all the advertising for the film and things like that. And I think, you know, having listened to a few people talk about this is very much this. One of the lines that I appreciated is, this is very much quote unquote like avant-garde art, right? And so much of avant-gardeness is what this writer was talking about, the podcaster was saying, is defined by not what they're for, but what they're against. And so very much this is, as you said, an anti-family film, and they're just punishing you for expecting any form of, you know, familial love to be presented, because it's literally non-existent. There's no grace for anyone anywhere to be found that is trying to be normie, if you will.
No, and I mean, there are moments I also like. I love some of the references, like basically Dawn gets acid thrown on her face by Ida.
Yeah, and that's at the same dinner party, right?
The same dinner party, because the idea was Dawn had run Gator out of town. Ida was desperate, and at that point, you know, the Davenports, oh no, not the Davenports, the Dashers are thrilled at the idea that she's scarred by this acid. And then there's a whole scene in the hospital riffing off of Eye of the Beholder in Twilight Zone, where they unbandage, you know, Dawn Davenport.
I remember. Yes,
and then they take it, and then she's so beautiful when she's kind of hideously deformed, and playing with that whole idea. And I think that's the kind of the other part of the film that moves into is, you know, what is beauty? Beauty is crime. And then what role does, you know, the audience play in these performances? And it kind of gets, you know, to be a kind of performative discussion. And I like the first half of the film a lot better, in fact, because I think the development of Dawn Davenport is great. I think the push of the Dashers and then mainlining Eyelasher, although I freaking love when Divine dances around downtown Baltimore as he's going to visit with that dress that comes down around this.
Yeah.
I just love it when Divine starts dancing and does the trampoline and like all of that and just kind of freaks out and manic. I
gets in a playpen filled with mackerel and is pretending to eat it, and then there's all these scenes with Taffy. I mean, we're kind of wild. We should, because like, you know, Taffy freaks out finally and says, "I want to go live with my dad," and so there's a whole scene with Earl Peterson because she gets his address from Dawn, and Earl is so drunk and disgusting that Taffy just murders him with a knife, and then Taffy comes home again and pretends like, oh no, that address was wrong.
Exactly. And then I'm going to join the Hare Krishnas.
And then she finally comes to her senses and says, like, I got to find a way out of this by becoming a hippie.
Which obviously the mom doesn't take kindly to.
No.
Because Dawn, when they finally become, they let Aunt Ida out. And
and they've already chopped off Aunt Ida's hand with an axe, and it's turned into a hook. And oh my God, this movie's crazy.
This movie is insane, and it is. It is then at a point of just kind of like, can you survive it?
Yes.
Can you stand out? Although I really do like the scene, like the whole like idea, and you wrote it in the notes. Who wants to die for art? When Divine basically does their performance, this is Divine's big, or Dawn's big performance, I'm using the two interchangeably, and comes on, does the whole routine on the trampoline, in the mackerel, like you said, pulls out the gun, talks about giving Richard Speck a blowjob, which is just completely like out of control, and then starts Who Wants to Die for Art and starts shooting the audience.
Me!
He does. Yeah. And you can imagine where it goes from there.
Well, I mean, there's a court scene. And I do love hearing about, John. The funny thing is, listening to John Waters talk about pretty much anything is one of the most charming pieces of, dialogue you can listen to. He is so charismatic and charming. And so him, and I listened to this interview with this man from Film Forum, and they barely talked about the movie. It was conceivably about, I think it was because Female Trouble was becoming part of the Criterion Collection, and they were doing a release of the film. And so there was this 30-minute interview on stage before they watched it or after it. I don't know. I'm just speculating all of this. And he was such a Waters homer. I loved him so much because he was just like awkward, and he's drifting and talking, and it's not even about anything about their inside language that they live together. They were talking about places he'd worked, and he's like, oh yeah, I shared that experience, and et cetera, et cetera. And I appreciate that because this is very, 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 very much a film that's designed for a very specific culture. And if you're not in that culture, you're not going to be able to connect to it. And in that same podcast, Horror Queens, I think it was Trace Thurman, he described, it's like, so if you're not a part of it, it doesn't mean you can't learn to be a part of it. And so I appreciate that too. So even though this is a film I probably will never, ever, 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 ever watch again, and I have no interest in going back and saying, now I need to watch Pink Flamingos. No. But the idea is that the more that you read the film, right? And this is a film that's meant to be read. Like, you have to appreciate it for the culture it's for and who they are saying they're antagonistic towards because they've felt their antagonism so much. That I get, and it's one of those things. Like, I'm glad it exists. But I'm at the same time saying it's not really for me.
This is not your film. Well, it wasn't your choice. So you can say, I didn't choose this. When they come after us, Michael, you could say, that wasn't my choice. That was his.
Yes. And Jim, I will burn and I will die for you because I love every fucking one of you out there.
Exactly. Well done. I can't top that ending. No, I mean, look, kids, go see it. Change your life.
Don't. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Your life. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.